The Shoeshine boy and the forgotten wallet. It was a quiet morning on a busy street corner. In downtown Los Angeles, the sun had just started to rise, casting a soft orange glow across the sidewalks. People rushed past, glued to their phones, coffee in one hand, stress in the other. But in the middle of all this noise, there sat a small boy on a wooden crate, head down, shining shoes like his life depended on it. His name was Elijah. Elijah was only 12, but he had the eyes of someone much older, eyes that had seen too much too soon. His hands were small, but they moved with speed and care. Every shoe he touched became brighter, cleaner, like he was polishing away the dust of the world. He wore a simple blue hoodie, faded jeans, and shoes that were 2 sizes too big. Beside him, a worn-out box held brushes, polish, and a tiny cup for tips. He had been sitting in that same spot for months, since his mother fell ill and couldn't work. His father had left long ago, and now it was just him and his little sister. Hope every dollar he earned went toward medicine and a little food. Elijah didn't complain. He had learned that life didn't always give you what you wanted. But he also believed, deep down, that if you kept doing good, something would change. That morning, a man in a simple black jacket and sunglasses approached him. The man looked tired but kind. He didn't seem rushed like the others. "Can you shine these?" the man asked softly. Elijah nodded, not looking up. "Yes, sir, only $5. The man smiled and sat down on the wooden bench nearby. Elijah bent down and started working, gently brushing and polishing the leather shoes. The man stayed silent, just watching the world go by. When Elijah finished, he handed the shoes back and the man thanked him, pulling out a $10 bill and dropping it into the tip cup. Elijah smiled for the first time that day. "Thank you, sir." The man nodded and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. It wasn't until half an hour later that Elijah saw something on the ground next to the bench. A small black wallet. His heart jumped. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It felt thick. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside, there was a thick stack of $100 bills, maybe over 1,000, and an ID card. He squinted. At the name, Keanu Reeves, he blinked. No way, it couldn't be. The kind man who sat on his bench, who tipped him $5 extra, was the Keanu Reeves. He had only seen him in movies. Never imagined he'd be sitting just feet away. Elijah looked around, panic setting in. The crowd had grown. People came and went like waves. He stood up on his crate, scanning the sidewalks, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man. But Keanu was gone. He could have kept the wallet. No one saw. No one would know. The money inside could help his mom, could feed hope for a whole month. But Elijah stared at the face on the ID, at the kind eyes in the photo. And he knew he couldn't. His mama always said, "Honesty is who you are when no one's looking." So Elijah packed up his box, held the wallet tight, and walked. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know how to return it. But he knew he had to try. He made his way to the nearest police station and stood at the front desk, nervous, holding the wallet in both hands. "Excuse me," he said, voice shaking. "I think this belongs to someone important." The officer behind the desk looked down and raised his eyebrows. "Where'd you get that, kid?" A man dropped it. "I shine shoes on 7th Street. I didn't know he was famous. I just want to give it back." The officer took the wallet carefully, flipping it open. His eyes widened. "Wait a minute, this is Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves." Elijah nodded. "Yes, sir. I didn't take anything. I just want to return it." The officer stared at the boy for a long moment. Then something softened in his eyes. "You stay right here." Within minutes, things started moving fast. Phones rang. People whispered. Another officer brought Elijah a bottle of water. "You okay, kid?" Elijah nodded, though his stomach felt tight. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside the station. Out stepped a tall man in sunglasses and a black jacket. It was him. Keanu Reeves. Elijah's mouth went dry. Keanu walked in with quiet urgency. The front desk officer pointed toward the boy, and Keanu's eyes followed. When their eyes met, something shifted. Keanu slowly walked over and knelt beside Elijah. "You found my wallet?" he asked, Gently. Elijah nodded and held it out with both hands. I didn't take anything, I swear. Keanu took it and checked. Inside, everything was untouched. His credit cards, cash ID, all there. He looked at the boy again, this time with deeper curiosity. You could have kept this, he said softly. You needed the money. I can tell. Elijah looked down. My mama's sick, and my sister's hungry. But she always says, never take what ain't yours. For a second, Keanu didn't say anything. Then, he did something no one expected. He hugged the boy. In that busy police station, in front of officers and strangers, the famous actor hugged a Shoeshine boy like he was the most important person in the world. And that moment would change everything. The moment that changed everything. Hug lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime for Elijah. It had been so long since someone held him with that kind of warmth. Keanu Reeves pulled back, slowly, and looked him in the eyes. What's your name? He asked. Elijah, the boy whispered. Elijah. Keanu repeated softly, like the name meant something special now. You did something very few people would do. The police officers watched from behind their desks, some nodding, others smiling. Something about the moment felt heavy, important, like the air had shifted. Keanu stood up and spoke to the officer beside him. Can I talk to him alone for a moment? The officer nodded and led them to a small room in the back, quiet and private. Keanu pulled out a chair for Elijah and sat across from him. I need to ask you something, Keanu said gently. Why did you really return the wallet? Elijah looked at his shoes, then up again. Because I didn't want my mama to feel ashamed of me. She always says, no matter how poor we are, we don't steal. Keanu's face didn't change, but his eyes grew glossy. He leaned back and folded his hands. Your mama must be a very wise woman. Elijah nodded proudly. She is. She's sick right now. Can't walk much. I'm trying to earn enough to buy her medicine. My little sister's name is Hope. She's only 6. I take care of her when I get home. Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly. Elijah, how would you feel if I offered you something? Elijah frowned. Like what? Not money, Keanu said quickly. Though I want to help you with that too. But something more. The boy tilted his head, curious. What if I told you, Keanu said, that today, you're not just a Shoeshine boy today, you're a symbol. A reminder that even in the darkest corners, there's still light. You reminded me of something. I almost forgot that honesty, even when no one is watching, is powerful. Elijah didn't fully understand, but he felt the weight of the words. Keanu leaned forward. Would you let me visit your mother? I'd like to meet her. And if you're okay with it, I'd like to help your family. Elijah's eyes grew wide. You want to come to our home? Keanu smiled gently. If you'll have me. Elijah hesitated, not because he didn't want to say yes, but because he was afraid it wasn't real. He had learned not to trust promises. Too many had been broken before. But something about Keanu felt different. Not just the movies or the fame, but his voice, his eyes, his stillness. Okay, Elijah said softly. But our place is small and messy. Keanu chuckled. I've been in messy places before. The ride to Elijah's neighborhood was silent for most of the time. Keanu sat beside him in the back seat of the SUV, listening carefully as Elijah described their small apartment and how he cooked oatmeal for Hope each morning before walking her to school. They pulled into a rundown complex on the edge of the city. Chipped paint, broken windows, and torn curtains told stories of hardship. But Elijah didn't seem ashamed. He walked with his head up. This is home, he said. Keanu followed him up the creaking stairs to the second floor. They stopped. At apartment to be. Elijah knocked gently and called out, Mama, it's me. I brought someone, a weak voice answered from inside. Elijah, is everything all right? He opened the door. The apartment was small. The living room doubled as a bedroom. On a worn-out couch lay a thin woman with tired eyes and a kind face. She sat up slowly when she saw the stranger behind her son. Mama, Elijah said. This is Mr. Keanu Reeves. He's the man who dropped the wallet. Lakeisha, Elijah's mother, looked shocked but tried to compose herself. Oh, you're the movie star. Keanu stepped forward and gently shook her hand. I'm very happy to meet you. Your son is remarkable." Tears formed in Lakish's eyes. "He's all I've got. He's my little hero." Keanu turned to Elijah and smiled. "I see where he gets it." He didn't stay long. Just enough to sit with them, listen to her talk about her health, hear Hope's tiny voice from the back room calling out for her brother. When Hope walked out and saw Keanu, she squealed in surprise and hugged Elijah tightly. Shyly peeking at the guest, Keanu promised them that he would return soon. He thanked them for letting him into their home and gently handed Lakish a card. "This is my number. Someone from my team will call you today. Please answer. We're going to fix this." And then, before leaving, he handed Elijah something folded in his palm. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. Elijah opened it after Keanu left. It was a check. $10,000. But more than the money, it was the words written on the memo line that stayed with him: "For courage and honesty, Keanu." Keanu didn't stop thinking about Elijah all day. Back on set, surrounded by cameras and scripts, his mind wandered. Something in that boy had touched something deep in him. He had seen too many people chasing fame, power, and money, but Elijah had none of those, and yet he had more strength than most grown men. Later that night, Keanu posted on his rarely used social media account, "Today, a young Shoeshine boy taught me more about character than any Hollywood script ever did. He found my wallet and returned it without hesitation. He didn't know who I was. He only knew what was right. His name is Elijah, and he reminded me why kindness matters. We rise by lifting others." The post went viral overnight. People across the world were moved. Some cried. Some offered help. Messages poured in. Celebrities shared the story. And while Elijah slept on a torn mattress beside his sister, unaware of what was happening, the world was already shifting in his favor. And Keanu? He had already made a decision. He wasn't going to help Elijah for a day. He was going to change his life forever. The world meets Elijah. Elijah woke up the next morning to the sound of knocking at the door. It wasn't loud or angry, just steady and calm. He sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and tiptoed over so he wouldn't wake Hope. When he opened the door, a tall woman with a gentle smile stood outside, holding a clipboard. "Good morning," she said kindly. "My name is Claire. I work with Mr. Keanu Reeves. May I come in for a moment?" Elijah blinked. He still wasn't used to hearing those words, Mr. Keanu Reeves. It felt like a dream he hadn't fully woken from. He nodded slowly and stepped aside. Claire walked in and looked around the small apartment. Her smile didn't change. She didn't flinch at the worn carpets or the cracked ceiling. She simply turned to Lakisha, who was now sitting up on the couch. "Miss Lakisha," Claire said warmly, "Keanu asked me to come by and speak with you about some things. He wants to help, but he wants to do it the right way, with your permission and your guidance." Lakisha's voice was soft but steady. "What kind of help?" Claire sat down and opened her folder. "First, we'd like to get you proper medical care. We've already made arrangements at a nearby clinic. Transportation is covered. Second, we're setting up a trust fund for Elijah and Hope, something that'll grow over time. Keanu also wants to cover rent here for the next year while we help you look for a better place." Lakisha covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "This is too much." Claire shook her head gently. "It's not charity, ma'am, it's gratitude." Elijah reminded Keanu of something very personal, something about dignity and truth. "He believes your family deserves more than survival. He believes you deserve peace." Elijah stood quietly in the corner, unsure of how to feel. Everything was moving fast, but part of him, the part that had grown up too soon, stayed calm. He listened. He watched. Then Claire turned to him. "And Elijah, Keanu wants to meet with you again. He said he has something important to ask you." Later that afternoon, another black SUV arrived. This time, Elijah wasn't nervous. He walked out with clean jeans, a fresh t-shirt someone from Claire's team had bought, and his Shoeshine box under his arm. He refused to leave it behind. Keanu greeted him at a quiet rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city. It was peaceful, no paparazzi, no loud music, just the breeze and the sun dipping behind tall buildings. Keanu stood when he saw him. "There he is," he said with a smile. "My hero." Elijah smiled back shyly and sat down across from him. On the table was a small box wrapped in brown paper. "Before we talk," Keanu said, "I want to give you something." Elijah unwrapped the box and opened it. Inside was a brand new pair of black leather shoes, shiny, strong, beautiful. "I had them made just for you," Keanu said, "because no Shoeshine boy should wear shoes that don't fit." Elijah laughed a little, holding the shoes close. "Thank you." Keanu nodded. Then his voice became more serious. "Elijah, do you know what a documentary is?" Elijah thought for a moment. "Like a movie, about real people." "Exactly," Keanu said. "I've been working on one. A project about people who live with dignity and courage, even when no one sees them. And now, I want to include you." Elijah's eyes grew wide. "Me?" "Yes," Keanu said. "Not because of what you did for me, but because of who you are. You're not just a boy with a Shoeshine box. You're a symbol of something bigger, and I want the world to hear your story." For a long moment, Elijah didn't say anything. He looked out over the rooftops at the world below. Can I still shine shoes?" Keanu laughed, and there was something almost proud in his voice. "Only if you want to." The filming started that same week. A small camera crew followed Elijah on his regular route. They didn't interfere, just watched. They captured him cleaning shoes, talking to people, helping an old man cross the street, buying snacks for Hope with a handful of coins. They filmed his mama, sitting on the couch, telling stories about when Elijah was little. They filmed Hope drawing pictures on the wall with chalk, singing quietly to herself. And everywhere they went, people started noticing. "Is that the boy from the Keanu Reeves post?" Someone whispered at a bus stop. "I read about him." Another said at the grocery store. "Returned a wallet with thousands in it. Didn't keep a dime." Soon, strangers began stopping by the Shoeshine corner just to meet him. Some left tips. Some left handwritten notes. One woman handed him a warm sandwich and said, "Thank you for reminding me that good still exists." But not everyone was kind. One afternoon, a man in a suit stopped in front of Elijah and sneered. "You really think you're special just because you didn't steal something?" Elijah looked up at him, confused. "People like you don't change the world," the man muttered. "You're just a kid with dirty hands." Elijah didn't respond. He just bowed his head and went back to polishing the shoes of an old woman beside him. Keanu saw the footage later that evening. He paused the video and stared at the screen. Then he made a phone call. "We're not just telling his story," he said. "We're going to change how the world sees kids like him." The next day, Keanu announced the launch of a foundation, the Elijah Project. Its goal: to find, support, and uplift children from difficult backgrounds who live with integrity. Just like Elijah. The announcement went viral. News anchors across the country told the story. Talk shows invited Elijah, his mama, and Keanu. People in different cities started donating to the foundation. Celebrities offered to mentor kids. Schools reached out. Everything was moving like a wave, and Elijah was in the center of it. But even with all the attention, all the cameras, and all the lights, he never stopped shining shoes. Not because he had to, but because it reminded him where he came from. And how far he could still go. Behind the lights. Beneath the surface, Elijah sat quietly in the green room of a TV studio, legs swinging nervously under the chair. He was dressed in a clean button-up shirt and new pants. A gift from the producers. The cameras were being set up outside, bright lights pointing at the stage, where he would soon be introduced. Keanu walked in and gave him a smile. "You ready, champ?" Elijah nodded slowly, though his hands trembled slightly. "I think so." Keanu knelt down in front of him. "You don't have to say anything perfect. Just speak from your heart. The world already loves you for who you are, not who you're pretending to be." Elijah took a deep breath. "Okay." Double quotes. Minutes later, he walked onto the stage. The crowd applauded. The host smiled warmly and shook his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said, "you all know Keanu Reeves, but today we're more excited about the young man sitting beside him. Meet Elijah, the boy who returned a lost wallet without hesitation." not knowing it belonged to one of the biggest stars in the world. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Elijah smiled nervously, then glanced at Keanu, who gave him a thumbs up. The interview began. Elijah, the host asked, "What made you return the wallet when you could have kept it? Especially knowing your family needed help." Elijah looked out at the crowd, then down at his shoes. "My mama always said, when you do what's right, even when it's hard, it means you're stronger than the world around you." The audience fell silent. A few people wiped away tears. "And how has your life changed since that day?" Elijah thought for a moment. "A lot of people talk to me now. They say I inspired them. But I still feel like the same boy. I just have a little more help now. And hope." The host smiled, visibly moved. "You've inspired all of us, Elijah." But as the lights faded and the applause echoed through the studio, a very different moment was happening far away, back in Elijah's neighborhood. A boy from the same building, Jaron, watched the interview from a cracked TV in his living room. He was older than Elijah by 2 years, and he had always thought the world didn't care about kids like them. But now, everyone cared about Elijah. "He ain't special," Jaron muttered. "Just lucky." His aunt, sitting nearby, looked over. "He's honest. That's what makes him special." Jaron scoffed, but something in his chest twisted, because deep down, he wished someone had seen him. A few days later, Keanu took Elijah and Hope to a children's museum. It was a private visit. No cameras, no reporters, just them. For the first time in a long while, Elijah felt like a kid again. He and Hope laughed as they ran from room to room, pressing buttons, touching displays, getting their hands messy with art supplies and paint. Keanu watched them with quiet joy. But then, outside the museum, someone was waiting. A man in his late 30s, wearing a baseball cap and holding a microphone, stepped out as they exited the building. A cameraman followed closely behind. "Keanu, is it true you're adopting this boy?" he shouted. "Is this a publicity stunt? Some people think this is all for attention." Keanu's smile faded. He placed an arm around Elijah and Hope and kept walking. "Do you think it's fair to give one poor kid all this help when millions more are still struggling?" The man called again. This time, Keanu stopped. He turned to the reporter and said, calmly, "We're not trying to fix everything, but if we can change one life, then that life will change others, and that's how it begins." Then he turned back to Elijah and whispered, "You okay?" Elijah nodded slowly. "I'm just sad people think it's fake." Keanu looked him in the eyes. "Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand strong." Later that week, Claire visited Lakeisha again. This time, she brought something unexpected, an envelope. "This," she said, "is an offer for housing, a real apartment, 2 bedrooms, clean building, safe neighborhood. Keanu's covering the deposit and first year of rent." Lakeisha covered her face and cried quietly. "We've never had anything like this." Hope came running from the back and hugged her mama. Elijah stood still, holding the envelope, as if afraid it would vanish if he blinked. "You deserve this," Claire said gently. They moved in 2 days later. No more broken windows, no more mold, a real kitchen, a room just for Hope, and a small corner by the window where Elijah could keep his Shoeshine box, not because he needed it anymore, but because it was part of his story. But the journey wasn't over. One evening, while Elijah and Keanu walked through a quiet park, they sat down on a bench to watch the sunset. Keanu turned to him. "Can I ask you something hard?" Elijah nodded. "What do you think hurts the most, being poor or being invisible?" Elijah thought deeply. Then he said, "Being invisible, because at least when you're poor, people know you need help, but when they don't see you at all, it's like you don't exist." Keanu stared at the sky. "I felt invisible once, too, even with all the cameras, all the noise." Elijah blinked. "You?" Keanu smiled. "We all have something we hide, something we carry. That's why people like you matter. You remind the world to stop and see." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. 2 souls from different worlds, one rich in money, the other rich in heart, sitting side by side, teaching each other. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, Elijah whispered, "I don't want to just be the boy who returned a wallet." Keanu nodded. "You won't be." And deep down, Elijah knew his story was just beginning. Asterisk from footsteps to footprints. Elias stood in front of a crowd of strangers, holding a microphone in both hands. His heart beat like a drum in his chest. The auditorium lights were bright, and rows of faces stared back at him. Students, parents, teachers, and even people in suits from the city council had gathered. They weren't there for Keanu. They were there for him. A local school had invited Elijah to speak at their Honesty and Hope event after hearing his story. When he was first asked, he wanted to say no. He was scared. But Keanu told him something the night before. When the world gives you a stage, use it to lift others. So now, here he was. Elijah took a deep breath and started to speak. I was just a kid on the corner, shining shoes so my little sister could eat and my mama could get her medicine. I didn't think anyone would ever notice me, and I didn't do anything big. I just gave something back that didn't belong to me. The room was completely silent, but that one choice changed everything. Not because it was loud, not because it was famous, but because it was right. He looked around, his voice steady now. I'm not better than anyone. There are kids just like me on every street, and they're not waiting for fame. They're waiting to be seen. Maybe you can be the one to see them. The audience clapped, slowly at first, then louder and louder. A teacher in the front row wiped her eyes. A student in the back stood up and clapped harder. And somewhere in the middle, Jaron, the boy from Elijah's old building, watched, quietly, his eyes filled with thoughts he didn't know how to name. The very next day, the Elijah Project launched its first community center. Inside, kids from tough neighborhoods could get help with homework, talk to mentors, even learn skills like painting, coding, and music. And guess who was invited to cut the ribbon? Elijah. He walked up with Keanu at his side. They both held the scissors and, together, opened the door to something new. News reporters snapped photos. Parents cried. Little kids stared at Elijah like he was a superhero. And in a way, he was. Not because he had powers, but because he had done something rare in today's world. He kept his soul clean. He walked down the hallway of the new center and stopped at a small classroom. Inside, a group of kids were sitting on beanbags, listening to a woman read a book about courage. One little boy looked up and said, "That's him. That's the shoe boy." Elijah smiled, walked in, and sat on the floor with them. "Hi," he said gently. "I used to sit on sidewalks, just like you're sitting here now. But you know what changed me?" The kids leaned in. Someone believed in me. A few days later, Keanu took Elijah to a surprise meeting. They walked into a room filled with framed photos and gold plaques. It was a quiet, elegant space, a boardroom belonging to one of the biggest non-profit organizations in the country. Keanu nodded toward a group of people standing around a table. "Elijah," he said, "meet the people who are helping us take your project worldwide." Elijah's eyes widened. "Worldwide?" A woman stepped forward and knelt to his level. "We want to name a scholarship after you. Kids from all over the world who show honesty and courage will get to go to school in your name." Elijah couldn't believe it. He looked at Keanu. "This is really happening?" Keanu nodded. "Because of you." Meanwhile, things in Elijah's old neighborhood started to change. Jaron, who had once scoffed at Elijah's fame, began walking past the Shoeshine corner more often. One day, he found Elijah sitting there alone, just shining shoes again. "Like old times. You really still do this?" Jaron asked. Elijah smiled. "Yeah, it keeps me grounded." Jaron hesitated, then sat beside him. "You think someone like me could ever turn things around?" Elijah didn't say much. He just reached into his box, pulled out a brush, and handed it to him. "Sit with me," he said. "You don't have to start big. Just start honest." From that day forward, Jaron came back every afternoon. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about what was broken. They just worked, and slowly, Jaron began to believe, in the quiet, steady kind of way, that he was more than his mistakes. Keanu continued to stand behind Elijah, but he also began stepping back, letting the boy lead. It wasn't about the actor anymore. It was about the legacy they were building together. One night, they sat together on the rooftop of the new community center, stars shimmered above, and the city buzzed below. Keanu handed Elijah a small notebook. "I want you to write your story," he said. "Not for the cameras, not for the media, for yourself. Write down what you've learned, what you've lost, what you've found." Elijah opened the book and looked at the blank page. "What if I don't know how to begin?" Keanu smiled. "You already did, the day you chose to do the right thing." Elijah looked up at the sky and whispered, "I want to help others feel seen, the way you helped me." Keanu put an arm around his shoulder. "Then you already know your purpose." They sat in silence again, not because they had nothing left to say, but because some moments are meant to be felt, not spoken. And beneath the stars, in the quiet heartbeat of the city, a boy who once sat alone with a Shoeshine box now carried the weight of hope, not as a burden, but as a gift. The legacy of a single choice. Elijah stood on the stage of a grand hall, wearing a small black suit and a tie that kept slipping to the side. Hundreds of people were seated before him, world leaders, teachers, artists, and children from places he had never heard of. Banners hung above that read, "Honesty is the new heroism." Next to him sat Keanu Reeves, smiling quietly, his hands folded in his lap. Cameras rolled. News outlets from around the world were broadcasting the event live. And yet, the only thing Elijah could think about was his mother. She was sitting in the front row, tears shining in her eyes, holding hope in her lap, who wore a pink dress and kept waving at the crowd. The host of the event stepped forward and said into the mic, "And now we are proud to welcome Elijah Williams, founder of the Elijah Project, and the young man who reminded the world that integrity still exists." As applause filled the hall, Elijah stepped to the podium. For a moment, he froze, not because of fear, but because he remembered who he was. A boy who used to sleep on a mattress on the floor. A boy who carried a Shoeshine box and walked 10 blocks every morning. A boy who once held a wallet full of money and chose to give it back. He cleared his throat and began, "People ask me a lot about what it feels like to be here, to have lights on me, to speak to people in power. And sometimes it feels unreal. But the truth is, none of this started with lights or speeches or cameras." His voice grew stronger. "It started on a sidewalk, with a man who trusted me without knowing me, and with a decision, one simple decision, to do what was right, not what was easy." He paused and looked out over the crowd. "Some people say I was lucky, but I think real luck is when your heart is still good, even when life is hard. And that kind of luck is something anyone can choose." He looked directly at a group of kids seated near the front, many from rough neighborhoods, some who had traveled hours just to see him. "You don't need a stage to be a hero," he said gently. "You just need a moment, one honest moment, and maybe someone who believes in you." The room went quiet, not out of boredom, but because they felt the weight of his words. Then, slowly, a standing ovation began, not from the back, but from the children in the front. They stood first, then their parents, then everyone else. And in the middle of all the applause, Keanu stood too, not as a star, but as a friend. In the weeks that followed, things changed quickly. More schools joined the Elijah Project. Classrooms in Brazil, Kenya, Pakistan, and the Philippines hung his photo on the wall under the words, "Always choose honesty." Scholarships were awarded. Libraries were built. Kids once forgotten were now being lifted. And still, every Saturday morning, Elijah visited his old Shoeshine corner. He no longer needed to be there, but he chose to. He would set up his little box, kneel down, and shine shoes for anyone who walked by. Sometimes he didn't charge. Sometimes he just talked to people. Listen to them. "Why do you keep doing this?" one tourist asked him. Elijah smiled. "Because it reminds me where the story began." One Sunday afternoon, Jaron came running to Elijah's apartment. He had finished high school, something no one in his family had ever done, and he had news. "I got accepted," he shouted as Elijah opened the door. "They picked me. The scholarship from your program. They picked me." Elijah grabbed him and pulled him into a hug. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Jaron grinned, then turned serious. "I wouldn't have even tried if it wasn't for you." Elijah shook his head. "Nah, you just needed someone to remind you what you already had inside. And in that moment, Elijah saw what Keanu must have seen in him, the ripple effect of one choice. Months later, Keanu invited Elijah and his family to a small private celebration. No media, no cameras, just food, laughter, music, and stories. As the sun set over the hills, Keanu raised a glass. "Elijah," he said, "you changed my life. You reminded me what matters, and now you've done the same for thousands of others." Elijah blushed. "I didn't do it alone." Keanu smiled. "You didn't have to. Real change doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real." They toasted. Laughter filled the backyard. Hope danced barefoot in the grass while Lakeisha watched her children with pride. Her health stronger than it had been in years. Years later, Elijah would look back on that day at the police station, the moment he stood there, holding a wallet with shaking hands, unsure of what to do. And he would smile, because that single honest act had built schools, healed families, inspired cities, and even changed a man who once seemed untouchable. A man named Keanu Reeves, who had everything except the reminder that kindness still lived in the quiet corners of the world. And it all began with a boy, a wallet, and a choice that made the world stop and listen, a choice that became a legacy.